So are dividend stocks just like boring?
They don't have to be.
But aren't they? Like,
I think in the history of things, I mean, even sometimes whenever I'm talking to friends, I'm like, we're just the boring guys. We do dividends, nothing flashy.
but when you think about dividends, I guess the conception out there is that it's utilities, gas companies, or energy companies,
Yep.
and
Some like
consumables.
packaged goods.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's it.
Yep.
But times, they are changing.
They are.
So let's talk about the
some of it-
evolution of tech companies and dividends, because there's been a pretty seismic shift that started actually in the 90s,
Correct.
and it's starting to pick up steam now.
Yeah, and most people don't realize that a few of your favorite companies are actually dividend payers.
Dividend payers, not
and
all of them.
consistent
Yes.
dividend payers.
And actually, of the Magnificent Seven largest companies in the world, on that list, you're actually having more and more of them pay dividends.
Four of them.
Well,
four of the seven.
Three have been consistent strong payers. The fourth one's kind
new.
of a
Microsoft,
Yeah.
Apple,
yep.
Facebook just put one in,
That's the new one.
and then NVIDIA.
NVIDIA's we'll talk about that in a minute, but NVIDIA's kind of like we're paying a dividend,
They
but
check
we're
the
not a
box.
dividend. Yeah, they're checking the box. It's a good way. So let's talk about the backdrop. Normally, when you're thinking about a tech company or you're thinking about a startup, the reality is, hey, we're going to start with a small staff. We're going to raise a lot of capital and grow our staff, and we're going to start this. I'm bootstrapping just cash and an idea and passion.
That's right.
And then we're going to sell it for billions, and investors are going to make their money when we sell it.
When we sell.
If you look at some of the largest companies like Apple started in a garage,
Mhm.
Amazon started in a garage.
Same
I
thing.
mean, those are the bootstrapping,
Yes.
startup companies that have literally redefined how things happen in this world. And that's always been the tech sector. It's only good for growth. We're going to invest hopefully earlier, for a few cents or a few bucks, and then we're going to sell it for hundreds a share.
Right.
Right?
Because we're going to every single penny we can squeeze out of this company is going to go right back into innovation and trying to drive return of stock price.
And that brings up a good point. Let's talk really quick about the difference between a value stock, a stock that pays a dividend, and a growth stock, a stock that doesn't.
Yep.
So help me understand, what's a growth stock?
So that the growth stock is I'm putting every bit of cash that we get, capital, we're going to reinvest it back into our company.
Yeah.
We're not going to pay anything out.
Investors get nothing.
Doesn't go to the shareholder at all. And you're a part owner in that company.
Yeah.
But everything else is going to go to the running of that business and trying to increase stock price.
So management says the only value that you're going to get is the value you get from me.
That's right.
Because we make cash, we're going to put it back into what we believe is going to push this company ahead, push our stock price up, because ultimately they want that price to go up because you don't sell them when it goes up. And then when it plateaus, they understand bad things are happening. They're going to lose their job. That's growth stock. What's the value stock?
So the value stock, they too do the same thing. However, along the journey, they want you as a shareholder to participate in that. And they typically pay it out in the form of a dividend.
And we love that.
Yes.
So when it comes to dividend stocks, I mean, as an investor, I like to consider a dividend a tethering device.
That's right.
It's like if you think about jumping out of an airplane, you got your parachute on the back, and if you do a tandem jump, you are tethered together. So when the guy who has the parachute on his back, when he decides to pull that strap or not pull that strap, whatever they do, you are literally connected. When it comes to a dividend stock, you actually have that connection where you get a portion of the revenue is getting paid out. You do your research, you understand what you're doing. You can find yourself in situations where every year you're not only getting paid, you're getting paid the next year even more and more and more. So I would say there's a something that's holding your feet to the fire when things get bad.
Sure.
Because the market is wild and it goes up and it goes down. And when you don't have a dividend and things get bad, you're out.
That's right.
All you see is red and you're like, hey, I don't want to stay and lose money. But when I can tell so many stories of clients. Like I had a client in my office like 8 years ago crying on the preface of retiring, scared to death. And, here we are 8 years later, and the same client is like, I don't even look. I have no fear of the market. I'm getting consistency of income. I'm not worried at all. The value of the portfolio goes up and down with the market, but the income is just steady.
Yep.
Increasing with inflation.
Right. And that's what you want. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to realize that the stock price is being driven by what people in the market and investors think the future value of this company is going to be.
And the one thing I love about, I'm keeping going to this tethering side, is when you have markets that are going up, all stocks go up. Okay. Right. So you'll typically see dividend stocks grow less in bull markets, not much less, but less. Mm-hmm. But in bad markets, in bear markets where things are falling off a cliff, growth stocks get crushed because there's no tethering device.
That's right.
Because you're like, I'm just losing, I'm out. And what happens to dividend stocks?
That's where everybody runs to.
They not only run there, but people don't run out.
That's right.
Because they're like, well, why would I sell? I'm getting paid.
Yep.
So now you have a stock that's stable because of its dividend. There's a lot less volatility because people are tethered to that income, especially if you're retired. You're like, I'm living on this money. Why would I sell it? That's right. What you get.
Yes.
There, if anything, is like, can I get some more?
That's right.
Because the dividend's paying more now. So we have this backdrop of tech companies that have never really paid a dividend, but that has changed. And then one of the biggest, most notable companies to pay early was Microsoft. It started in 2003 and has paid consistently.
I wonder why they started paying a dividend in 2003.
Right after the bubble.
They were probably like, hold on, here's a way that we can consistently grow and we can give a little bit to our shareholders to where they don't leave us high and dry.
So they learned a big lesson.
Yeah.
Through the 90s, their stock and everybody's stock just soared through this bubble. And then that bubble burst in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. The S&P lost 9, 11, and 22% in 3 consecutive years. And then where everybody in Apple and Microsoft, they're like, oh man, we saw our stock go from here down to here. And at the same time, their financial people are like, hey, look what happened to the value markets.
Yeah.
We have this many outstanding shares. We have this much going on. And that industry over there, they hardly lost anything. If anything, they went up.
Right.
Like dividend portfolios in those 3 years actually maintained their value and started to grow in 2003, where the tech bubble started to get crushed. Mm-hmm. So Microsoft's like, ding, got an idea. and you bring up a great point. They started paying and have been paying ever since. Yeah. Why? Because they wanted that tethering device.
That's right.
To make sure the next time the bubble burst, their stocks don't get sold.
Microsoft, when you start really doing your research on them, not like this
isn't a recommendation.
Facts, not a recommendation, but please do your research. But they are a really great, consistent payer. And they increase their dividend payment
18 straight years.
Yeah, they're knocking on the door of aristocrat status and 10%.
And it's a tech company.
Correct, which people are like, wait, what?
And that's the whole point of this show is like the tech industry is evolving where you have companies like Microsoft. Next one we're going to talk about is Apple.
Yeah.
Apple has been notorious. Those two founders knew each other, started, at some point they joined and they separate. But the realities of what they were doing is they are the epitome of a garage startup that has now been paying dividends. Microsoft started in 2003. Apple started way before that in the 90s. They paid their first dividend in 1990, paid for 5 years, and then they paused because I think that's when Jobs got the boot.
Yep.
And
they were in real turmoil. The balance sheet was really bad.
Really bad. They made a lot of bad decisions. That's why I don't think he was the best manager. He's a great visionary.
That's right.
Not the best manager. And then they started paying again in 2012 and haven't stopped since. So they wanted to be the first pioneer, got ahead of themselves, put the brakes on, did a lot of reorganizing again.
Right.
And then they started paying in 2012 and haven't stopped and been increasing their yield and their dividend every single year. It's been a great company.
Yeah.
Again, not endorsing it, but just saying, hey, these are 2 rock solid startups. And then yet there's another one that just started this year, which is Facebook.
Yeah.
And Facebook, again, started in Harvard. Everybody knows the story.
In a dorm room.
In a dorm room, has now declared a dividend and they're paying out.
That's right.
And who knows what their history is going to look like. They are very cash heavy. They make a lot of money. I don't love how they spend it.
Yeah, they spend a lot of money.
But nonetheless, they got in and out of the AI space and they're still heavy into, metaverse or whatever.
Well, and I think a lot of these tech companies also realize they have, if we went and surveyed 100 people and we said, how would you categorize Microsoft, Apple, or Meta? They would all still put them in that growth category.
Dividends.
They would not put them in value.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you start looking at it, year over year, and we're talking about that retention, tethering them to holding your shareholders to hold the stock, it becomes really difficult when you're making trillions of dollars to then also grow by 20% every year. So when you get more mature and you really have a great business that's kicking off a ton of cash, it's hard to keep that percentage there that investors want.
And I think a company that's quickly going to follow is an Amazon, where they're not paying.
I think that one, the writing's on the wall for Amazon. When it happens, TBD.
Yeah.
Especially with, you see how much they're putting into building out their infrastructure and all these storage facilities so that they can be super close to where you can basically get it same day.
Yeah.
But once that happens, they'll have nowhere else to really go. So they'll have to keep you engaged through a dividend, probably.
Correct. I think Amazon's going to be another great, potentially aristocrat dividend paying stock in the future. They're destined for it. I mean, they make so much money. I mean, we were figuring this out the other day. If you look at the market cap of NVIDIA, it is actually larger than Amazon. And Amazon makes 10 times the revenue.
Yes.
So you have an Amazon that's 10 times larger a company from a revenue standpoint, and they have a smaller market cap. How in the world is that possible?
It's not sustainable.
It's definitely not sustainable. There's going to be a time in the not too distant near future, or if you're watching this after it already happened, NVIDIA is destined for correction.
Yeah.
We're not that Amazon is overvalued, but they're valued in line with their revenue. Right. Apple is, Microsoft
I think it's around a 12 or 15 times earning, which is not crazy for a tech
And then
company.
You look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA has been paying a dividend forever too, but it's like a penny, 2 pennies.
Yeah, it's more of a check the box.
But that is another stock that's paying a dividend. Although, sure, they checked the box, but nonetheless. So let's land this plane. So key takeaways here. I don't want investors to look at dividend stocks and go, it's just stocks that grow 5% a year or don't grow at all, and all you get is the yield. And that is, for whatever reason, the reality of what investors think about dividends. And dividends outperform growth stocks over time. I mean, it's just a proven fact.
Show. Sounds like a great show we should do.
What?
To show exactly how dividend paying stocks
outperform.
I
mean, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Like,
With
I mean,
time,
it's multiple percent. It's actually over 4% a year on average that value dividend stocks outperform growth over the long haul. Yet the emotional person inside of us is like, but I want that 100% this year. I'll take 4% more growth year over year over the flash fry, because you're going to give 80% of that back at some point in the near future.
You never know the other side of it.
Yeah.
It's great
because there's no tethering.
Up. That's it.
Because it's this violent return where dividend stocks will tend to be up and then moderate, where growth, I mean, it's just a nightmare of volatility. What else?
My big takeaway is dividend stocks are not your grandmama stocks anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are some of these companies that are now moving into the mature status, where they've been around 30, 40 years, and they're having to be creative in how they keep shareholders there.
The tech companies.
And that's specifically where, I think it's worth giving dividends a second look, because not only do we love them, they're great, but some of your favorite companies are either paying them or are getting ready.
When I was at Evan, my oldest son, when I was at college, dropping him off, his good friend's mom's a financial advisor. We got into a conversation, and I won't tell the whole story, but we started talking about philosophies, and I was like, I'm a dividend guy. I love dividend stocks. And she's like, oh, and she's like, what other strategies do you get into, and how do you complement the fact that they don't grow? And I was like, what do you mean they don't grow? And he was like, well, I understand. She goes, I understand dividend stocks been really good in the past, but in the present, they just haven't outperformed. And I was like, when's the last time you done research on that?
Right.
Like, I mean, literally, if you've done research in the last 5 years, you'd understand the reality behind how great dividend stocks can produce even in this entire environment. Right. And this whole show's about that, because it's not just utilities anymore.
No.
You've got stocks in every single sector that pay dividends. Yep. This whole myth that dividend stocks are for old people, or they're just for people that just want income and they don't get growth is a lie.
That's right.
It is a flat lie. Dividend stocks outperform growth stocks over the long haul. Not in a short window of downturns of markets in these isolated situations. In all market conditions,
that's right.
Over time, dividend stocks outperform. Period. End of show. Like at the end of the day, you cannot beat dividend stocks from a growth standpoint or income standpoint. Income, you could probably argue. Total growth, can't touch it. So good show. Hope you learned a lot. I've enjoyed this. A lot more to come.